Whew, the Golden Stallion, the man of tomorrow, Savzu, the rated R radio star, and boy, a guy that at one time was called the King of the Nerds, and I am dead serious about that. And that is a long story for another time. Something I think I talked about that. Boy, it was probably 4 years ago on Sovereign Tech. Anyway, so I am here for another little Patreon episode, and something that's become kind of a tradition with Sovereign Tech and with Sovereign Tech, Patreon episodes particularly, is that anytime there's a new DC animated universe movie, I review it, and usually it's a very short episode. In fact, this one will probably be pretty short. And I cover it because I think that the DC, and if you've heard any of the past DC animated universe reviews, you know the score already. You know what I'm going to say. But I think that these are the best comic book movies, bar none. Animated or not, animated or live action, the Marvel, cinematic universe, the MCU doesn't hold a candle next to the DC animated universe. This is literally the best stuff getting produced today. However, before I let the cat out of the bag, I really, to this day, I haven't seen a bad movie out of the DC animated universe. And except for certain renditions of the Justice League, as far as animated TV series go, I haven't really seen, there really aren't any bad, ever since Bruce Timm came on the scene, with Batman, the animated series and so on, there hasn't really been a bad animated, aspect to DC Comics really at all. Like I said, there's some parts of, like Justice League Unlimited and Justice League in general, I wasn't a huge fan of, that were on Cartoon Network and all that. But Teen Titans is great, obviously. There's a lot of stuff to really love in the entire, not just the DC animated universe, but in DC's animated history. Of course, there's the classic Super Friends, which is still, just one of the most popular, and one of the most well-regarded. Even though today, by a lot of animation standards and even storyline standards, people would think it's ridiculous. But, really animated shows ever made. Super Friends is still, that popular. So what I'm going to review this time around is something that, admittedly, I didn't exactly know what it was. Okay, I knew who the character was. I knew who the character was very well. I just didn't know, what is the story behind this movie. And honestly, I downloaded it. It was something released on May 8th, and I didn't really know what the deal was with it. And I watched it, and this isn't really part of the DC animated universe, so it's almost unfair to review it. But I do want to talk about it because it lends itself to another aspect of what DC is doing in media outside of the comic books that I think is important to talk about. So the movie is Vixen, and yet just like your Vixen, and unfortunately it's not about the really fantastic metal band. All woman fronted. I love the band Vixen. They're like they were back in the 80s and the 90s, they were called the female Bon Jovi. And absolutely, I'm a huge fan of Vixen all the way. Edge of a Broken Heart, the whole thing. I love it. I guess I should say hard rock. I know some people have emailed me and said, oh, well, there's metal, but then there's hard rock. And really, Brian, you listen more to hard rock than you do metal. And yeah, I can get that, but I do listen to a lot of metal. I just don't always review it as often. But anyway, so Vixen, this is the name of the movie. And it's not actually a movie. What it is a compilation. It's a movie, yes. It's an animated movie. But it's a compilation of 2 seasons of an animated web series for the character of Vixen. Now, the unique thing here is that Vixen exists within what's called the Arrowverse, okay, which is all the shows that are kind of based off of or that surround Green Arrow, which for a couple seasons, the TV show of Green Arrow was tremendously popular and very well regarded. Now, not so much. But sort of its offshoots, Flash and all those shows on the CW, they get well regarded and all that. And we're going to end up probably talking about them quite a bit. Myself, I'm not a fan of the CW DC universe. I'm not a fan of the Arrowverse. I like the Green Arrow. as a comic book character. I certainly like the Green Arrow when he was on, the original. I forget the actor's name who played him because he also played Aquaman in a pilot that never got picked up. But the actor that played him in Smallville, I thought I'm actually a huge Smallville fan. I thought that show was fantastic, and the fact that the Arrowverse doesn't follow that path, that in that universe, I think that's really disappointing. But I absolutely love Smallville. Anyway, so I don't, I'm not invested in the Arrowverse in any way. I've checked it out. I've watched stuff, tried to get into it, blah, 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 because I am such a huge comic book fan. And particularly, I'm a huge DC comic book fan, at least historically. I'm not always a fan of everything they've been doing lately, or at least over the past, few years. I totally supported New 52. I thought that was a great idea, but then they just started botching everything up, not long after they started New 52. Anyway, so Vixen is, so it's a web series, and it's based around, the eponymous character of Vixen, who, well, boy, where to even start with all of that? But there's her name, the character's name is Marie McCabe, and she ends up getting these. Well, okay, so let's back up a little bit. Vixen originally was a comic book character that was supposed to be starting in around 1978. Now, a huge deal happened in 1978 in the comic book industry, and that's what's called the DC implosion, where it's almost the best way to describe it, or the best thing to compare it to would be the game crash of the video game crash of 1984. It's sort of a similar situation that occurred. So this character was supposed to have her own series, but then it didn't really, because they were trying to create this, again, African female comic book heroine that just it didn't come to be. And eventually she would premiere in in Action Comics, and then she'd end up being in a lot of different team series. She'd be in Justice League. She was even a member of the Suicide Squad for a while, which I think is kind of interesting. A lot of things. And come around 2008, really the first time I can recall really hearing of her is they did a 5-issue limited run called Vixen Return of the Lion in 2008. Where she was in it. And I mean, it was a very sexy comic book, admittedly. But anyway, so Vixen is this American, female character, or American, did I say American? Fuck. African female character. The comic book largely takes place in America, or, her appearances usually take place in America, though she has this tribal history in Africa and all this stuff. Boy, and where do I even start with all that? So, well, let me talk about the movie first. Then I'll get into critiques about the character. The movie itself, again, this was a compilation. You can tell that it's a compilation of a bunch of different episodes, even though they added in some odd 15 minutes of extra footage to kind of put it all together and really bring some resolution. And there's already claims, because I guess the web series was popular enough, and the movie has been fairly popular enough, I guess, that they may be making an actual series about the character, a live action series about the character of Vixen. So, but this is all canon stuff within the Arrowverse. I don't know, I thought it was weak sauce. I really, really thought it was weak. It's probably the worst animated effort that DC has done in a long, long time. I mean, I really thought there wasn't much going for it. Now, granted, it helps watching this if you have knowledge of the Arrowverse, right? If you know, because Green Arrow's in it, Flash is in it, Black Canary's in it, right? All these characters, that from Legends of Tomorrow and all that shit. If you know all that stuff, Vixen makes a little more sense. But it really, as a standalone, and I am the product of kind of understanding it as a standalone, because again, I'm not so deep in the Arrowverse. I know all the characters. I know all these comic book characters, deeply, or intimately, I guess is the word I should say. But I mean, as far as their renditions in the Arrowverse, no, I'm not that versed, no pun intended, in it. And yeah, I just, if this was an introduction to, to kind of like the character of Vixen, and if this was an introduction to the Arrowverse or something like that, which it might be because it's animated and kids would watch it or who knows what. Like I said, it's piss poor. The acting's fine, the animation is fine. It's just the story. There's no real story here, and it doesn't hold you. And in fact, it's kind of sad because if the web series you would assume is very popular because it got renewed for a second series, a second season and all this, and then eventually gets made into a movie. If web series are usually short little clips, a few minutes long, and they got to kind of hook you. Okay. If that was the point here, like I don't see how this would ever hook anybody. Like there's not enough going on. You get no investment in the character. The character of Vixen is very like they try some cheap comedy, but it's very cheap comedy. Like there's a scene where she's kind of making jokes about how ridiculous her name sounds and that she's going with it, and it just falls flat. It's like, yeah, that's fucking predictable, The music, nothing special to write home about, which is a shame because DC is, more so than Marvel ever has. Like DC, they have that 2-disc collection where it's like that 75th anniversary of DC music. And when you get your hands on that, from movies to TV shows to animated movies to animated shows and all that, the rich history of DC music, it is a rich history. It's some of the greatest music ever composed. And Vixen added nothing to it. There's just, you can say, well, it's just a web series. What the hell do you expect? Well, I don't know. Like DC's when it comes to animated stuff, DC, like that's DC's bread and butter when it comes to animated series of any kind, web series or whatever. And so to kind of, to not be up to snuff, I think that really sucks, like I applauded, probably another recent outing, would be, there was the Green Lantern, animated, but that was like CGI animated where he would, was going against the Red Lanterns and everything. That was a pretty weak outing too, but I actually applaud them for doing it in CGI to make it very different from the animated, usually the other animated series. Because that was really kid stuff. That was admittedly openly kid stuff. As to where this is attached to things that are not kid stuff, that are supposedly very, adult at times, that being the Arrowverse. So it's another case, really, where, there's no characters to really care about. Like, there's her dad, there's her sister who, wants to steal her powers too. Because the whole thing is that this character of Vixen, like, has these totems, which are like these crystals that come from this ancient tribe. And these crystals give, the wearer gives them powers, like powers of water or powers of fire or, powers of these kind of psychic animals and everything that can come out and whatever. And it all, I'll just cut to the chase. It all comes off, honestly, in my opinion, it comes off as racist. Like, it comes off as, there's nothing wrong at all, and I hope I've made my case, in the past. I'm all for a lot of very different social movements. I really, really am. But I've said this before. I've complained about the fact that they constantly use like the Black Green Lantern and all this. It's great. Yes, I want diversity. I want black characters. I want them so bad. But I think it's downright insulting to like have to constantly attach them to the jungle, to constantly have to attach them, to some kind of like tribalism and all this stuff. And I don't think it comes off as respectful. I think it comes off the exact opposite. Now, I could be wrong, okay? And, let me know if you think I'm being way off base here. But I really, really felt that this was nothing less than insulting. I didn't think it came off as a strong character. I think it came off as a stereotype and a bad one. It's a lot like, kind of my complaints of, so there was the Marvel show Iron Fist, right? Which didn't really strike very well, no pun intended, with people. Like a lot of people complained about it and whatever. And there was a lot of initial complaints about it. The initial complaints were that they were having a white guy play the lead character, of Iron Fist, who is this, kind of like this hero, Marvel hero with this, Asian kind of mythological history and all this stuff, right? And people say, well, it's racist to have a white guy, playing something that has to do with like Asian history or something. But then, Asian people came out and said, correctly, in my opinion, they said, no, you people are the racists for thinking that everybody that does Kung Fu has to be Asian. And I understand that, and I agree with that completely. And this is where I think Vixen also falls flat in that, and comes off honestly as the more racist, because we can have this black female character, and strong character and all this, but she's got to be tied to the jungle and all this, and she's got to be tied to lions, and she's got to I mean come on. To me it really came off as so stereotypical. And it's not like, here's the thing, like there's a way to, I get it. If you want to identify, if someone wants to identify with like, their African heritage and all this stuff, I'm fully supportive. People can do whatever the hell they want. Okay. That's fine. But there's a way to do it right. Like I think, one character that I'm a huge fan of from Marvel is Black Panther. Huge fan. Now, you could say, well, how is Vixen different from Black Panther? Black Panther is like, the king of his own jungle and everything, and, he has Wakanda, and, how does that mesh with what you're saying about Vixen? Well, here's the thing, is that, Black Panther, he's like, he's the head of state of his own of his own country, but this country is, highly technologically advanced. Like, I mean, it's more advanced than America, and it's like, it's the country where that produces most of the world's adamantium and all this stuff. Like, it's a world player. It's not something necessarily, backwater or whatever else. It doesn't come off as like something animalistic necessarily. I mean, it's Black Panther, I understand, but you get my point, is that it's very 21st century. It's very modern. I mean, like, but it can still, it still pays homage, obviously to, to African history, which I think that's the way to go about it. I mean, to my mind, so I'm ethnically Jewish, right? And I mean, it'd be like, I don't know, it'd be like making a Jewish character, and there's plenty of Jewish characters in comic books. I mean, in DC as well as Marvel, you think Kitty Pryde, she's probably the most famous. Shadowcat from the X-Men, she's Jewish. There's a whole slew of them. But that'd be like that they get their power from like, picking up a Torah or something. It's like, no, like, let's get past, come on, like, stop this. Like, there's no need for that kind of identity, or that she has to go, that'd be like Kitty Pryde would have to go to the Wailing Wall, to kind of get her powers of the ability to go through walls or something, which ironically almost makes a touch of sense. But at the same time, like, no, that's stupid. You don't have to attach people like that. Like, they can have that ethnicity and they can have kind of that cultural history, but leave it at that. Don't make it like the central figure of their, of their being to be these ancient whatevers. It doesn't fly. I would find that to be incredibly insulting, or that she has to, I mean, we could go down a whole list of different Jewish rites maybe that she'd have to do to claim her powers and all that. And it would come off as ridiculous. It's like, no, it's like, I mean, let this person be the modern woman or whatever, I really felt, I felt that this movie was insulting, and correct me if I'm wrong. And because if I'm off base, I will apologize, like across the board. I am happy to apologize. But not just that, the story sucked, the music sucked. Like there was no, in my opinion, there was absolutely no redeeming quality whatsoever in this little movie. Yeah, I get it. It's a unique animal in that it, it's a compilation of a web series. But I've seen that sort of thing done before, and it can be done right. And you can put in like really cool connecting tissue, as it were, to enhance it, to make it a little more movie. You know what I mean? There's plenty of ways to go about this. There's plenty of ways to do it right. So anyway, I wasn't impressed, and it's sad because like I hate to say anything negative, I hate that something comes up that's negative. Within the DC animated universe, within the DC universe as a whole. But honestly, like I'm very negative, and you can disagree with this, if you like, but I'm very negative on everything that CW is doing with DC. I think the Supergirl series, which I watched, and I know originally that was CBS, right? The Supergirl series I think is ridiculous. I think the Flash series is ridiculous. Like I think all of it gets treated with kid gloves. And it's not necessarily for kids. Like I said, I mean, I can think of plenty of moments where like this is really serious, hardcore stuff. I mean, what the fuck are they doing? Doing fucking musicals? Like, and they're not doing them in a kitschy way. Like, you can do musicals in a fun way. Like, I remember when Hercules and Xena did musicals, and it was funny. Like, it was actually really, really well done. This stuff's not being well done. It's pure teeny bop nonsense. In my opinion. And Vixen just kind of adds to that, where everything just feels so shallow. That's really it. You know, that actually hits it. That hits the button. Is everything going on with the Arrowverse and what CW does, all of it feels incredibly shallow for DC. And that's a slap to the face of DC. Because that's what makes, in my opinion, Marvel was always the shallow universe. Right, except for maybe like Fantastic Four, where they had real family problems, which was fascinating, or where Iron Man, who minus Iron Man and Fantastic Four, like Iron Man, was a drunkard, he had real problems, but that was always very shallow. As to where DC was always very deep. I mean, and like dealing with the big stuff. I mean, you did you're doing like Jack Kirby's stuff, right? with oh, hell, with Darkseid, and Orion and all those guys, right? All the fourth world shit. I mean, man, like, anytime I see DC getting handled in such a shallow way, it's insulting, and it's insulting to the brand. It's insulting to the history of DC, a magnificent history, frankly. I mean, like, even, Batman the Animated Series, who is that geared towards? Yes, it was on Fox. It was on Fox Kids. That was the label fucking for it. Was Fox Kids. It was, geared towards children. But did Bruce Timm treat Batman the Animated Series as some kind of shallow shit? No, are you kidding me? It's some of the deepest, it's widely regarded the greatest cartoon of all time because anybody can watch it and get stuff out of it. Adults or otherwise, because it's so deep and it's so serious. That's where I think everything in the Arrowverse, it just feels like kids' gloves. And you don't have to put on the kids' gloves, I mean, like, I've been reading comic books since I was a kid, and they weren't putting kids' gloves on the comics back then. The stuff was serious. The stuff, I mean, and there's something to this. I've talked about this before, I think, on some Q&As, where a big problem is that, how exactly to put this, is that content made for kids. Like, I feel like it almost stunts their development, their mental development. Instead of letting them see stuff, I mean, they don't need to see, like, I'm not saying censorship either, but they don't need to see a bunch of gory shit, or, they don't need to see, like, full-on sex scenes and all that stuff. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that, there's nothing wrong with the character that a child is rooting for. There's nothing wrong with that character being 30, 35, 40, something like that, like I was when I was rooting for Batman. Okay, and Robin doesn't have to be 12. Robin can be 20 or whatever, I think there's a problem with that. Like, I've talked about this before, that, like, when I was a kid, all of the heroes on TV or in comic books or whatever, or not all of them. I mean, you had the Teen Titans back in the 70s, and all that. I know. But, like, the big heroes, were all in their 30s, like Captain Kirk, wrestlers, I mean, go down the list. And I think when you start making all of the heroes the same age as the kids, like, I think you kind of stunt growth, mental growth with that. There's nothing wrong with aspiring to grow up. As to where it seems to be kind of like there seems to be this push for, like, eternal youth, but not eternal youth, like eternal immaturity. And I know there's been cases over, as long as there has been mass media where, where this wasn't the case, or, where there have been, like, child heroes and all this different shit, right? I understand that, but it just seemed to, like, it seems like now it's really like this dumbing down and things being very shallow and all that just seems to be far more prevalent in, like, the past maybe 15 years, maybe even longer. I think it's crazy. I mean, here's another one. How about for Marvel? The fucking X-Men, the 92 X-Men? Are you kidding me? That's serious as a fucking heart attack. And that was like that was the other number one show on Fox Kids, And I mean, you didn't want you never wanted Wolverine to fucking get into a goddamn musical. No, you were like rooting for Wolverine because he carved up the top of Scott's car because he was pissed off that he was off with Jean Grey. And it's like, fuck yeah, baby. Like that's what you want to grow up with. You know what I mean? Not this nonsense. Oh, if anybody listening to this is a fan of the Arrowverse, I mean, you can write to me and tell me what you dig about it, because maybe I just don't get it. Maybe I'm missing the point. I don't know. You could say it's cool to finally see them, on TV and all this. Yeah, I get that. But that's the thing. Like, I was a fan of Smallville. Smallville was all this shit on TV. He even had Supergirl. And, it was great with, what was her name? Vandervoort? What was the actress's name that played Supergirl in that? Something Vandervoort. I know that was her last name. Anyway, but I mean, that was awesome. That was really good stuff. And that was another one where, even though it was kind of like, yeah, it was Superman as a teen, right? It was Clark Kent as a teen. It didn't get handled shallow. Like, that was the best thing. The thing that finally sold me with Smallville was in the second season. It was like the second or third episode of the second season, where he's developing his heat vision. I've told this story before, I know. But anyway, he's developing his heat vision. How does he get his heat vision? He gets it by getting a Studenhofer. He gets it by getting a boner. He gets turned on, he can control his heat vision. And, like, that's a very serious subject to talk about. Puberty and all that. Oh, I thought that was fantastic. I was like, yes. I mean, like that was such a clever idea. I don't know. I don't read Superman that religiously. I like Superman. But I don't read it, that heavy. I don't know if they ever integrated that, like after New 52 or something, but they should have. Like, that should totally be a plot point, that, when Superman uses his heat vision, he's getting a stiffy, right? So, yeah. I mean, that's the way you do it, and I just feel like all of this shit is it's so shallow. There's no real depth to be had here. And I'm not saying Marvel's doing any better, certainly. In fact, I'm curious. I want to see the new Thor film. I got a shot. I saw a picture. They leaked pictures of Hulk's bed in Thor Ragnarok. Is it Thor Ragnarok? Is that the new? Yeah, Thor Ragnarok that's coming out, because apparently they're going to integrate the Planet Hulk storyline, which I think is one of the best storylines in comic history. Really, really love that. I'm curious. Like, I hope that when you see Hulk in bed, I want to see Hulk in bed with some women, or alien women anyway, whatever. They better sexy that shit up. That bed was sexy as hell. Otherwise it's going to be the same thing. It's like, oh, you're fucking shallow. You're not, you got lucky with the Iron Man movies because you had the one character that actually has problems, because he's an alcoholic. And then you got lucky with that. Otherwise, everything's shit, and so, I mean, we'll see. Like, I'm already, well, Doctor Strange is pretty good, but that's because the visuals were so unique. But that was kind of kids' gloves still. So, I don't know. I'm not very hopeful about any of these, any of the live action stuff. Like I said, the best thing going is the DC animated universe. But I think Vixen, for a lot of people, they might catch this and they'll go, what the fuck? Like, like they'll watch it and they'll be like, what did I just see? This isn't as good as, Bad Blood or Justice League War or, any of that, or Batman, or Superman Doomsday, or, Superman versus, or what was it? Shazam versus Black Adam or whatever. They'll probably say, yeah, didn't live up to any of that. I mean, they even made a short animated film for the what is actually the DC animated universe, for Green Arrow. And it was awesome. It didn't have anything to do with the Arrowverse, and it was great. And the music was great too, which, like I said, that's probably the worst part of this whole Vixen thing, is that the music's just passable. It doesn't stand up as to where, so there's a company called La La Land Records, which they work with Entrada as well. But the company La La Land Records, they sell very exclusive soundtracks. Like, they sell like 4-disc sets of Star Trek soundtracks or something for like Enterprise or Voyager, or Deep Space Nine. I mean, they're all super high quality, or they sell like those big volume sets of X-Files music and everything. And they have for like rare movies, they even have like a 4-disc set for Jurassic Park and all that stuff. I mean, they do really, really great releases. Now, they also release DC Showcase soundtracks, which are all soundtracks from all of the animated universe releases for the movies, for the animated universe movies. I mean, you can, like Justice League Dark, which I thought had a great soundtrack and that I reviewed recently. You can get that, you can actually get that through some digital downloads. But anyway, that is done through La La Land Records. But that's La La Land Records takes the time to release all of these soundtracks from the DC animated universe because these are such masterpieces. There's such great, works of art. Again, some of the greatest compositions ever done. And that's why they release them. That's why they bother to make physical releases or even digital releases of it all. And Vixen, and so it's just, it stands out when one of these movies doesn't have that quality of music. And Vixen does not. I mean, it's pure shit. So yeah, I think the movie was insulting. Personally, I mean, to me, it's insulting. It's insulting to DC. I think it's insulting, honestly, to to Africans in general. I think it's insulting, to black people, to POCs. I mean, it's insulting across the board. I was so unimpressed by this. So if you saw it, maybe on the torrent sites, and you haven't watched it yet, I hope my review saved you the time, because there's no point. It doesn't add anything to the animated universe. If you're into the Arrowverse, I guess it adds to that, and I guess she's actually going to be, Mira's going to be a character within that with live action. I think she's actually already kind of been in it, but yeah. And you can tell me, if you actually think the Arrowverse, has something going for it, let me know, because I just don't, but maybe I'm missing something. Maybe there's something I don't understand. So anyway, I'm going to be releasing a couple more reviews, and these are actually going to be of good movies, though movies you wouldn't expect. I'm going to be releasing this week a couple reviews for the Injustice movies. Now, what these are, so you know when they're coming, there's Injustice 1 and Injustice 2. Now, they are actually YouTube videos that were made of like all the full motion videos, like all the cutscenes and some of the gameplay for the games Injustice, Gods Among Us, and Injustice 2, which are both DC Universe games made by probably the greatest developer out there right now, NetherRealm Studios, which also make the Mortal Kombat games, of course. But there's some people out there that make excellent movie. I mean, this is a popular thing to where you make movies out of video games. That's not, where you make out and it's a full narrative and you watch it for a couple hours or maybe even longer. And you get to experience, the story that these games are putting out there. It's one of my favorite types of things to watch. The two Injustice movies, particularly are, well, I'll tell you this now. I mean, they're phenomenal. They're really, really great. And I have, in fact, I did a recent, I was doing like a Sovereign Top 8 about comic books and everything. And the Injustice comic books, the Injustice universe, because it is an alternate universe with DC, was on my top 8 because it's that fucking good. It's really the best DC comics you can read right now. So I will be reviewing those movies coming up, but you already know that I think they're great, but we'll get into the nitty gritty and the details on them. And I'll be releasing those soon. So anyway, there it is. There's my review of Vixen. Absolutely terrible. I wish I was saying something different, but I'm not. I think there's everything wrong with this. And correct me if I'm wrong. Go ahead and message me, email me, whatever. If you're into the Arrowverse and you get the deal and you understand Vixen, something I missed. I mean, I know the character very well. I get the powers. I understand the history and all that. Tell me about it. So anyway, there you have it. More coming out this week. And of course, we will have your regular Wednesday Q&A will be out along with the Hangout. And then we've got Dynamite Sovereign. So I will see you on the other side.
You just experienced Sovereign Tech. Go to sovereigntech.com, that's SOVRYN tech.com, and connect with us there. Find links from today's show and catch our podcast feed. Sovereign Tech is copy heart. Copying art is an act of love, and love is not subject to law. So please share the show however you like. Welcome to the evolution.